They call it election security. But when citizens need passports, birth certificates, and perfect records just to vote, we need to look closer.
The Save America Act could turn paperwork, database errors, and strict deadlines into locked doors between eligible voters and the ballot box.
So before the slogans and political spin take over,
Let's examine what is actually in this bill, who it could hurt, and why it matters.
Imagine being an American citizen who has voted for years. You move to a new county, change your name after getting married, or discover that your registration needs to be updated. You fill out the voter registration form. You sign it under penalty of perjury. You swear that you are a United States citizen. But under the Save America Act, that may no longer be enough. You may be required to produce additional documents proving your citizenship. That could include a passport, a certified birth certificate, naturalization papers, military records, or another approved combination of government documents. Supporters of this proposal call it election security. Voting rights advocates warn that it could become one of the most restrictive changes to federal voting rules in modern American history. So let us slow everything down and look at what is actually inside the bill. The official name is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, better known as the Save America Act. The House of Representatives has passed it, but it has not become law. It must still pass the Senate and be signed by the President before its major provisions can take effect. The first major change involves voter registration. Federal law already says that non-citizens cannot legally vote in federal elections. A person registering to vote must declare, under penalty of perjury, that they are a United States citizen. The Save America Act would go further. For new federal voter registration applications, the applicant would ordinarily have to provide documentary proof of citizenship. That means a person's sworn statement may no longer be enough. A passport would generally qualify. Certain birth certificates would qualify. Naturalization or citizenship documents could qualify. Some military and tribal records could also qualify. But an ordinary driver's license does not necessarily prove citizenship. Even a real ID does not automatically establish citizenship unless the identification specifically indicates that the holder is a United States citizen. That creates a serious problem. Many American citizens do not own a passport. Some people do not have immediate access to a certified copy of their birth certificate. Others may have lost important documents because of a fire, an eviction, homelessness, a natural disaster, or simply the passage of time. Replacing those documents can require money, transportation, internet access, time away from work, and a trip to a government office. For a person with a passport, a car, paid time off, and matching government records, this may seem like a minor inconvenience. For someone without those advantages, it could become the reason they do not complete their registration. The proposal also creates concerns for people whose names have changed. Consider a married woman whose birth certificate contains her maiden name, while her driver's license and voter registration form contain her married name. Consider someone who has divorced, been adopted, or legally changed their name. The bill includes procedures that may allow a person to explain the difference by presenting additional documents or signing an affidavit. Therefore, it would not be accurate to say that every married woman would automatically be prevented from registering. But that voter would still face an additional layer of paperwork. The citizen may be required to prove that the person listed on the old birth certificate is the same person standing in the election office today. That creates another opportunity for delay, confusion, or rejection. The bill would also change how mail and online registration work. People may still be able to begin an application through the mail or online, but completing the application could require them to physically appear at an election office or another approved location and present citizenship documents before the registration deadline. That means the process may no longer be completed entirely from home. The voter may need transportation. The voter may need time away from work. The voter may need childcare. The voter may need to find an election office that is open during hours they can attend. A rural voter may live many miles away from the nearest office. A disabled or homebound voter may not be able to travel easily. An hourly worker may have to choose between losing income and completing the registration process. These are not formal declarations that those people cannot vote. They are administrative barriers placed between the citizen and the ballot. Another major provision involves government databases. States will be required to establish ongoing programs for checking the citizenship status of people on federal voter registration lists. Information could be compared against records maintained by the Department of Homeland Security, motor vehicle departments, the Social Security Administration, and other government agencies. Supporters say this will help election officials identify non-citizens who may have registered illegally. But government databases are not always complete, current, or perfectly synchronized. Imagine someone who received a driver's license while they were still a lawful permanent resident. Several years later, that person becomes a naturalized United States citizen. But an older motor vehicle record still identifies that person as a non-citizen. That citizen could potentially be flagged because the older record was never updated. A name may be misspelled. Two people may have similar names. A date of birth may be entered incorrectly. An address may be several years out of date. Those errors matter when government officials are using databases to decide who may remain on a voter registration list. The bill generally requires voters to receive notice and an opportunity to prove citizenship before being removed. That protection is important, but notices may be sent to an old address. Letters may be lost, ignored, or misunderstood. Some citizens may not discover that their registration has been questioned until they arrive at the polling place. The election office may describe this as voter list maintenance. The citizen experiences it differently. The citizen experiences it as, "I have voted here for 20 years. Why are you suddenly telling me that I am not registered?"
The Save America Act wouldn't stop with voter registration. It would also establish a nationwide physical photo identification requirement for voting in federal elections. A voter arriving at the polling place would generally have to present one of the approved forms of photo identification. A voter without the required identification could be given a provisional ballot. But a provisional ballot does not automatically count. The voter could be required to return with acceptable identification within a limited period of approximately 3 days. Think about what that means in real life. A person who did not have the proper identification on Election Day must locate or obtain the document, find transportation, possibly miss work, and return to the proper election office before the deadline expires. The person may still technically possess the right to vote. But unless they successfully complete every additional step, their ballot may never be counted. The proposal would also impose additional identification requirements on many people voting by mail. A mail voter could be required to include a copy of an approved photo identification document or follow an alternative process involving Social Security information and a sworn statement. That may sound simple, until we consider voters who do not own a printer, copier, smartphone, or scanner? What happens when the voter is elderly and homebound? What happens when the copy is blurry? What happens when the identification is placed inside the wrong envelope? What happens when an election worker decides that the submitted copy is not acceptable? Every additional technical requirement creates another reason that a lawful ballot could be delayed, challenged, or rejected. Election administrators would also face additional legal pressure. The bill expands opportunities for private individuals to bring lawsuits alleging that election officials registered people without obtaining the required documents. Government personnel could face penalties for knowingly helping an ineligible non-citizen register or vote. Supporters argue that officials must be held accountable when they violate election laws. But the combination of lawsuits, penalties, and complicated documentation rules may also create a chilling effect. An election official may be afraid to approve an application involving an unusual birth record, an old name, or alternative citizenship evidence. When an official fears punishment for approving the wrong person, the safest institutional response may become, when in doubt, reject the application. That is where a law that sounds neutral can produce unequal results. The bill does not openly say that Black voters cannot vote. It does not openly say that Latino voters cannot vote. It does not openly say that naturalized citizens, married women, disabled people, elderly people, students, rural residents, or low-income citizens cannot vote. But those groups may be more likely to experience missing documents, outdated records, transportation barriers, name discrepancies, unstable mailing addresses, or difficulty reaching government offices. A law does not have to name a group directly for its burdens to fall more heavily on that group. To be fair, supporters of the Save America Act make a straightforward argument. They say only United States citizens should determine the outcome of American elections. They argue that citizenship should be verified rather than simply accepted through a signed declaration. They believe photo identification and government database checks will increase public confidence in the election system. The principle that only eligible citizens should vote in federal elections is legitimate. Non-citizen voting in federal elections is already illegal. The disagreement is not over whether non-citizens should vote. The real disagreement is over whether the documented problem is large enough to justify placing millions of lawful citizens inside a new national system of paperwork, database checks, identification requirements, deadlines, and possible voter removals. Documented cases of non-citizen voting have consistently been found to be rare. That does not mean election officials should ignore unlawful registrations. It means the solution should be proportional to the size of the problem. We should ask, how many lawful citizens could be delayed, mistakenly flagged, or prevented from voting while the government searches for a very small number of unlawful registrations? Election security must protect both sides of the equation. It should prevent ineligible people from voting, but it should also protect every eligible citizen from being wrongfully denied the ballot. So why are Donald Trump and his MAGA allies pushing so aggressively for this legislation? First, the phrase voter ID is politically powerful. It sounds simple and reasonable. But the Save America Act reaches far beyond showing an identification card at the polling place. It also involves citizenship documents, federal databases, voter list investigations, provisional ballot deadlines, lawsuits, and new responsibilities for local election officials. The slogan is simple. The bill is not. Second, the proposal reinforces Trump's repeated claim that American elections are filled with illegal voters. That message keeps his supporters angry, suspicious, and convinced that Republican election losses must have resulted from fraud or an insecure system. Third, the bill creates a political trap. When Democrats and voting rights organizations oppose the proposal, Republicans can accuse them of wanting noncitizens to vote. But opposing excessive voting restrictions is not the same as supporting unlawful voting. A person can believe that only citizens should vote, while also believing that the government should not block lawful citizens through unnecessary paperwork. Fourth, the burdens created by the bill would not be distributed randomly. People without passports, reliable transportation, flexible jobs, stable housing, or easy access to government records are more likely to struggle with the requirements. Those populations include many young voters, low-income voters, naturalized citizens, disabled voters, and voters of color. The bill does not have to say, "Stop these people from voting." It can create rules that predictably make voting more difficult for them. That is why many voting rights advocates view the legislation as voter suppression disguised as election security. The Save America Act would not openly announce that millions of Americans have lost their right to vote. It would do something more subtle. It would make access to that right depend on successfully navigating a new federal system of documents, identification rules, government databases, deadlines, and possible voter removals. For some citizens, that may create only a small inconvenience. For others, it could become the locked door standing between them and the ballot box. Election security matters, but a secure election is not one where eligible citizens are blocked by paperwork. A secure election is one where every lawful citizen can vote, every lawful ballot is counted, and no political party gets to choose its voters instead of allowing the voters to choose their government. That is why Americans must watch this bill carefully. Read what is inside it. Check your voter registration. Make sure your identification and records are current. Pay attention to what happens in the Senate, because voting rights are rarely taken away from everyone all at once. Sometimes those rights are buried beneath one more document, one more deadline, one more government database, and one more locked door.
Stay alert. Read the bill. Check your voter registration.
Because protecting the vote starts before Election Day. Stay informed, stay engaged, and never let confusion silence your voice.
Subscribe to Dub House 2019 for more truth, context, and real conversation.